Welcome, everybody. Glad you could join us again today. We're going to take this opportunity to answer a couple more of your questions that you sent in response to the survey about colored pencils. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to help if I can. And so Jeremy has a couple questions he'd like to ask.
Yes, thank you, Darrell. Today is the moment we've all been waiting for. We're going to talk about drawing skin tone with colored pencil. We had a ton of questions about how to do that, and we're going to get to that in just a minute, but I want to recap real quickly on some of the things we've learned in the series so far. And if you haven't seen the first two videos, I really highly recommend you go back and watch those. I mean, you can watch this one first, but just be sure you go back to those first two videos. Now, in the first video, Darrell covered some exercises that you can do on your own to really teach yourself how to blend colors, to create custom color combinations that are going to help you out in anything you draw. And then in video 2, Darrell talked about some troubleshooting tips. There's always going to be some issues and frustrations you'll run into as you're drawing, especially with colored pencil. And Darrell explained just briefly, some ways to avoid things like building up wax when you're putting down colored pencil, how to avoid all that waxy buildup that causes a mess and makes a haze. And he also shared some tips for how to erase colored pencil, or how to put your pencil on so it's easy to erase. And he also shared a few tips on how to keep your pencil sharp. The colored pencils tend to be a little bit softer, so he was able to show us how we can hold the pencil to keep it sharp while you're drawing, kind of a self-sharpening approach. So anyway, blah blah blah, enough blabbering. Let's get down to business. And skin tone. Darrell, portraits are a really exciting thing to draw, and you know that more than anybody probably. But being able to draw them in color adds a whole new level of intrigue. So Darrell, people want to know, how does your 5-pencil method play into this? When we're drawing skin tones with color, what would you advise? What are some tips and tricks that you can give us for achieving proper skin tone?
Yeah, it is exciting drawing a person, a face. I like to draw just about everything, but there's just something so powerful about a face being able to communicate, with the viewer. You have that connection, especially when we have eyes looking at you and all those kinds of things. And yet we don't want to come up with something that's abnormal because we just don't really understand what colors to use. There's a certain amount of, and I learned this long ago, I want to strive for achieving exactly what I want, but sometimes there's a reasonable compromise. And so we may not be able to duplicate exactly a certain color or value, but we can have what we're drawing stand alone, and on its own you may not see those slight variations in a little different hue. You just have to learn not to be so particular, and yet still strive for what you're trying to achieve and come as close as you can. What I think is one of the big advantages, again, and there's so many approaches to art. I'm sure many of you know that out there. And if you haven't, it's just a wonderful world of experimentation and trial and error, and it's exciting to see what can happen. I mean, you can put washes down and do colored pencils over the top of them. You can do a very bold style if you want. I prefer the more realistic style for what we're talking about here. There's a time and place for everything, but to achieve those realistic qualities with as much contour and depth to the drawing is, as I'm often trying to communicate to everybody, how can you do the same thing? How can you get the ultimate in that almost three-dimensional look? And so I introduced those color race pencils to you. They can be for preliminary. They can be an entryway into color. They can be completely compatible with so many other brands and types of colored pencils, the waxy ones, the oil-based ones. You can paint over them, and you can just use them to tint something slightly that may already be, the color is down from maybe like a Prismacolor, and you can go and maybe cut down on those white specks, the grain in the paper. if you haven't done it before. There's just all kinds of wonderful ways. They maintain a point very, very well. They're very much like graphite. If you've done quite a bit of drawing, you have that opportunity to have something that feels familiar. There's some things, though, that we approach maybe a little different. And I think the principles and the core concepts are still extremely useful if you learn how to have that tapered stroke and be able to blend things by creating those graduations, those tones that may go from light to dark and back to light again, and showing contour and curve. It really lends itself again to those wonderful contours of a face, those little variations of tone and value. And I'm saying little variations sometimes because most of the time it's better not to be too bold. I like to get a cutting edge to something that is in front of something else, and as many of you know, I like a clean edge to value and pull the face forward and drop whatever's behind it back. There's many things like that. I want to have a difference between some of those dark values that have a clean dimensional edge and some of the wonderful contours of the face. But for the most part, I think we will want to work from light to dark in this case. With my pencil work, I go from dark to light. Even though I start out light, I'm still working on the darkest values first. There's a certain degree, but we're going to modify it just a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at some choices that I just decided to pick out quick, just to show you basically three different skin tones and values that you might come across. Naturally, the woman on the left, the young lady on the left, is going to be close to what you would draw if you were drawing a baby. Very fair skinned. You may not have a whole lot of value, but there is enough that you can start lifting the cheeks and giving her that facial structure, that muscle structure to her face. You can demonstrate where it's shaded and where the highlights are going to hit. We wouldn't want to have just clean paper. We want to be able to have a value in everything, because then I can at least contour it and maybe just have something a little lighter. Because if it's just going to be bright white in any one of these highlights, we're going to end up by having something that's very flat, and also something that is probably going to be too gaudy. It's nice to reserve some of those nice whites for maybe the white reflection in an eye, or maybe the gleam of a tooth or something like that. But anyway, it's interesting with these three colors. I can do this with a limited number of pencils. And naturally, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my color erase, because I think that it's not only a good base, but it works as well for even a finished product if you want to. And then I have a lot more information in like the studio classes and some of the videos that I have that help you understand some of the variables. There's only a limited amount of time, so I better get going. And there's just so much to talk about, so I get to be a motor mouth. When you're getting the color erase, you'll find that there's a 12 pack and there's a 24 pack. The 24 pack is going to give you a few pencils that you probably won't have gotten in the 12 pack. The 12 pack is going to be more primary colors and some of the, I don't think even, maybe it does have brown, but anyway, it has a limited number of colors. And so one of the ones that's missing in that you will get if you get the 24 is a light peach, they call it. I've seen them label it as flesh, and it's light peach now, and probably if some other company takes over, they'll probably be tempted to change it to their own designation. But this is interesting, because if I were to draw a whole face with this, it would probably turn out to be a little bit yellow, a little bit pink. But if we learn how to go ahead and have graduations of value, then we're going to be able to go from dark to light. And I find that it's better to just brush this on, to be able to have the opportunity to just graze the surface and be in control of how dark something is getting. You might be able to see that this is a little bit more yellow than what is on her face. But again, if you don't have anything to compare it to, it is going to look just wonderful, especially when we start contrasting it with a few of the other tones. Now, I'm not going to try and replicate this face. All I want to do is show you some of the wonderful variations that we can come up with as we lay down this base tone. And you remember what I told you yesterday, this is very smooth. And yet, there's a subtle texture to it. Just like on pencil drawing, I can go ahead and try and, draw it refined enough that it just looks like a smooth face. And yet there's a subtle texture. And that's one reason why I prefer not to use a tortillon. And many of you are familiar with those. I just have this here for a demonstration, but still, this ends up by damaging that precious tooth that I was talking about. We don't want to mash it down because we're in desperate need of that jaggedness of the paper that is going to help scrape off the pencil as we go across it, both with graphite and the colored pencil. So we want to really maintain that. And if we were going to smooth this out at all, and maybe take a little of the graininess out, you might find that you don't even need to do it, but you can also do it with the brush. This brush comes in, I guess I better get in a little bit closer, right? Okay, this brush ends up by, for the color erase, acting just like it does with the graphite. It just, distributes it around, maybe even fills in a few of the little pits. Doesn't need much because it's already pretty refined, but I like the texture too because there's always a subtle texture to a face. And I like the randomness of this paper because we don't have something that's more like a fabric or a material. We have something that is there's a consistency and an inconsistency to the way our pores are and all the little imperfections that aren't really that noticeable. So you can do something like that. Now, if I wanted to come in here with this, I've got to decide, well, here I have a terracotta, but it's real tempting to come in with something like this and it can end up too orange. And so you know what a terracotta pot is for many of you out there. It's a pretty dominant color. And so we can end up with something that is quite orangey, for just coining a word there, to the orange side. I think it's a little bit unnatural for her, but might work out perfectly for something else. So what we want to be able to do is assess, okay, what would I be able to do to create some of these little tones here that are going to give her the shadow under her cheek and the contour, even around to the side of her face, or maybe above her lip and, underside of her nose and to the side, and her neck and things like that. And it turns out that this brown works out very well. It wouldn't work out, though, if I were to put it on heavy. So developing this patience and having this opportunity to just feather something on gives us this wonderful opportunity now to fade this in. As you'll notice, with a contour, you never have a clean edge to anything. It's just the wonderful gradation into the rest of the value that I put down initially. Same thing on this side. It just has a little more value in it. But if I were to put something too strong, I would be demonstrating something quite a bit different. And I would maybe suggest that I have a clean edge to value or something. And maybe it's a structural dimensional line. And it's real easy to see something like this and try to do it with too much of a cutting edge to something. When this is a contour is when you can see in and out of something without any interruption. Nothing's in my way. This jaw is in the way of the neck, so I have a clean edge here. And I want to be able to go past that and show a clean edge. But anyway, that feathering on, that practicing those fundamentals allows you to just not only blend it into the rest of the color, but it allows you to go ahead and be controlled. How dark am I going to go? Well, just put on a little bit, see if it works, and also always have a test piece if you possibly can, so that you can see whether that is even going to be the right color. I wouldn't want to come in here with something that is blue or purple because it has a tendency to show through everything. and it becomes pretty dominant. And it's very difficult to get off. But if I'm in the right category like this right here, well, now I can go ahead and tap that back and have a great opportunity to soften something that I had go on a little bit too bold, maybe a little bit too dark, and I can go ahead and lighten it up, and or I can take it off altogether. Now, remember I said this is too maybe a little red and a little orange, but look at how well it works with this Asian man here. I assume he's Asian. I'm not sure exactly, but we have so many wonderful skin colors all over the world, and I want to be able to have a shot at using the right color to demonstrate that. Now, I do believe that we often tend to go too dark with some people, like when we see a person with very dark skin, and there's many around the world, whether you're of African descent or whether you're Indian or Pakistani or some of the Aborigine people, they're very, very, very dark. And I don't want that mentality of saying, oh, this is dark, I better go ahead and press harder, and I want to work it up just gradually. And I also want to depend on the features first of all. So the features are very important. I want to depend on the features first of all, and then start adding my lighter values as an undercoating, and then start adding on my other values. But look at how this terracotta now worked out very well. If I were to have this down, I can come back in and use it as a blender, kind of like we do with our 4H sometimes. Sometimes even though we've gone to another grade, a softer, darker grade of pencil, we can come back in with the 4H and or 2H or something and actually refine it a little bit. Maybe, tone down some of those, some of the texture. But look at how well that works. I can come back in with after I put down that peach, and I can come in here and do some of my fading into the color that I laid down initially. So I can come in here and get quite a bit more intense by just lingering a little longer in the same place and making sure that I have a nice soft entry into some of these contours. And but this tends to just lend itself very, very well. Now that's only using 3 pencils. That's the peach, that's the terracotta, and that's also the brown. And you wouldn't probably think that the brown was maybe ideal for this woman who is so fair-skinned. But just pay attention and look and use that little test sheet that you may have off to the side, I hope, and you can see what color would be just right. Because if you were to use the terracotta in this, it would just completely tell a different story. It would change things drastically and probably bring too much attention to that color, especially if you had the peach and the rest of it. Now let's go over here just a little bit and look at this black man, and we'll put down let's put down another one here. Now you can see how this is yellower, but also it probably looks a little bit more that way because it's the only thing on the paper. When I start contrasting it with some of the other colors, we'll get maybe a little truer sense. I feel that there are many things that are appropriate at some stage or some point. I don't want to get in a habit of using quick solutions to everything, because then that takes, again, the wonderful control that I have to try to get something to become just as close as I want. If I leap over the barrier and I just start paying no attention, I am going to end up with maybe the opportunity to, or the need to modify it, wish I hadn't done it, wanting to go ahead and give up, throw the thing away. And sometimes, especially with those waxier pencils, you can't get it off to modify it. But with these color erase, I can. Now let's go ahead and come in here with the terracotta. Oh, it looks like it. That's probably pretty good. I'm not trying to do big patches right now because it would take so much time, but I hope you can benefit from this little patch that I'm doing. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Now this is with the terracotta, and you can see, oh, look at this. This really complements some of these areas. Of course, there's going to be texture, and there's going to be variations in the skin, and all those wonderful things that bring in, the character of not only the person but the skin. And let's go ahead and maybe get a little closer. But now, see, I can come in with my brown on top of that. And I can decide, okay, well, it does gradually in areas like this become quite brown. And so now I have a chance to come in here and just feather that on. Again, making sure that I'm staying in control and not getting too carried away and not doing something so bold that it's like this. I would never want to do that, and I don't want to scrub either. Oh, this is a Tuscan red. I have the wrong one I picked up there. But that's another one you want to be careful because it has a red that is hard and it dominates. So here's the brown. And that range of value starts giving you the opportunity to come up with something that's very, very, very close. And then if I felt like it needed a little bit more of that terracotta or that richer brown, I could come back in with this over the top and add a little bit more of that color in there. And once I put down one, I can always come over the top. If I do these in layers like this, it helps me to be able to, again, have somewhat like a transparent layer where I'm looking through the layer I just put on down to the next one. If I have 3 or 4 layers, it's down to the next one. If I have something else, it's down to the next one. And so, boy, under these lights, that one Tuscan red looked like it was brown, but still, there is a time and place for it. But you don't want to have something that's terribly dominant, and this red can really be strong. It can end up by giving an influence of something that is going to stay a little redder, even if you want to try and take it off. But there are places where that's appropriate. It might be the insides of the mouth, some of those darker places that help give something that's complementary to the pinker and a little bit redder aspects of a lip. But you'll notice that these lips are very subtle. This isn't terribly, red. This is has a little pink to it. So I would still put the flesh underneath of that and then just gradually add a little of the pink if that's what's necessary. It could be one that they call pink, or it could be a rose. But sometimes it's just feathering on a little bit of the carmine red. I'm out of the camera. But sometimes just looking at putting a little bit of value in that skin tone again that helps bring it back to something that's a little bit complementary to a lip, a little bit more of a red. Let's see what that pink would have done. So I'm almost done here. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of how wonderful, what a wonderful opportunity you have to create some of these values that may seem like they're almost impossible because you may not see that there's an exact color like that. Look at how much this is like that. This darker side, below that curve, that wonderful curve of her lip. Look at that. It's just maybe about 3 colors. And so if you don't see the color that you may think will put it right on, which is what happens with so often with Prismacolor and some of the other ones, they try to make a color for that. And then you can't really modify it too much. And so this way, again, I get to put a wonderful texture that I think is going to be very delicate and smooth. I have a chance to remove it if I want. I can come back in here and I can take out this is with my kneaded eraser too, remember. I can take out a highlight. I can absolutely lighten something up, all to another value. If I do it right in practice, I can take off one layer that's on top of another. I can have all those options, and I don't have to worry about having 160 colors, to do it. I'm working all this with about 4 or 5 pencils. And so you'll find that that's the way it is. Sure, we can get into the outfits, and now we have an opportunity to do something, with a couple more of the pencils. But wow, this is such a nice, wonderful, subtle color. Maybe a little bit of the violet would work over a lavender or something. And so with that simple set of colors, that's kind of what we got to the other day was, do I have to buy every color? And I have just found that I can go with a very simple palette, cut down on the money that I would spend. Sometimes I'd spend hundreds of dollars trying to make sure I had every possible scenario. And then I come to find out through the years, in almost every occasion, I can do far more with less, have more control. The outcome is going to be what I want it to be, instead of having, being dependent on what the manufacturer has said. It's been wonderful to have all the different variations. And so I hope that this gives you a little bit of an idea of how, even if you aren't familiar with it, you can, again, have that test sheet. You can have an opportunity to remove. You can have an opportunity to go gradually so that you don't just go leaping into the middle of it and find out it's not what you wanted and then you can't remove it. Art is so wonderful. And if you have the opportunity to express what you want and capture that subject, even better. It might not be such a scary place to go, and you'll end up by having more fun with your drawing, is what I usually say. I think it's a wonderful world, the world of art. Having that opportunity not only to express yourselves and have that joy and that almost meditative time, but somebody else is going to see what you did and appreciate it. And there's nothing better than to have somebody excited about what you've done. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. And we're going to have an opportunity here, I think tomorrow. We're going to have a series that I completed on a studio class. We took quite some time to go through it, and we called it Bubbles. The students ended up by naming it Bubbles, but it was a fish. The fish, it's maybe not a glamorous subject, but it gave us an opportunity to apply many different things to see how, when we just take colored pencil, we could end up by creating many of the things we're striving for as we do graphite, or if you were painting, those solid principles, and how to get the intensity in the color, even though we used only the color race pencils. And so it was a layering process. It was contour and curve. It was clean edges. It was detail, all kinds of fun things. And it gave me an opportunity to introduce, this world of color to a lot of people who had never drawn in color before and had no familiarity with it. And also, it gives me a chance over a period of time to talk about those little things that I think are important that I can't cover in just a few questions here. So I hope that if you decide you want to look at that, you'll enjoy it and learn a lot from it. That's the whole idea. And again, that's coming out tomorrow. So I'm glad for the opportunity to share with you. And I thank you, Jeremy, for relaying those questions. And I'll let it go back to Jeremy.
All right. Yeah, great lesson, great opportunity. And Darrel, do you have the fish picture in the studio with you?
Oh, sure.
I think
here.
I think it's too good not to show it.
But here it is. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom out. This is a fun opportunity. I was looking for this earlier and just found it. And again, it may not be the most glamorous subject, but the things that we did, putting the background on it, that gave us an opportunity to accomplish something that we wanted to learn. We put a few bubbles in there, which is part of the reason that the subject was called Bubbles, the fish. And, just have those opportunities to experiment with as much as we possibly could and see what happens when we use multiple pencils to create certain custom colors, and how we can again go from some of the deeper, more rich colors and get it lighter and lighter, and show all these wonderful little details and keep them separate. and just things to think about along the way. Same thing as a face, to be able to utilize the eyes and the nose and the mouth and separate it from its background and all those different things. So anyway, this is the one that's coming up, and I hope you enjoy it. Had a lot of fun with it. I think a lot of the students enjoyed it as well. So.
Oh yeah, I know they did, and I certainly enjoyed it myself. It was a great opportunity to sit in on this class and learn so much about colored pencil drawing. And we want you to have the same opportunity. And like Darrel said, we'll be launching this new series officially tomorrow, and we'll be sure to send you out an email with all of the specifics and the information you need. But I will say up front that we'll be launching this new series with one of the biggest discounts that we've ever offered with a new tutorial. And to top that off, for a limited time, we'll be offering a free 12-pack of Cool Erase pencils to help you get started more affordably. And these are the same pencils that Darrel demonstrated in class and he used on the actual project. So really good pencil to start with. I'm sure you saw that in the lessons. So again, tomorrow we'll be launching. Be sure to look out for your email. And thank you so much for all of your time and your questions. We really appreciate it. And if you have any more questions, concerns, comments, whatever it may be, please leave them in the comments section below this video, and we'll do our best to get back to you and answer them as we can. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for your questions. Glad for the opportunity to share once again. And we'll see you in the next video, whenever that is.